warmed up but not active full-stack developer in Box Design is here to tell us his insights. This presentation presents a custom import module that provides means to import data from external sources. The content is divided into two key sections. The first section focuses on the process of migrating content from the WordPress platform to the Orchard for Content framework. The second section describes how to import data from external sources into SQL tables to be utilized in portal applications.
Thank you. Before we start, can you hear me well? Excellent. So the talk or the topic of this presentation is bridging systems, seamless data integration in Orchard Core, which is just a fancy way of telling you that we need to import some data into our system. Before we start, something about me. I'm a software developer. I focus on delivering custom tailored portal solutions to our customers, from the design phase through implementation, testing, up to the acceptance part. I'm also a contributor in Orchard Core, sort of. First of all, the fix, I fixed OpenID validation settings, is not actually released. And second of all, I actually didn't add anything. I just deleted some code that was breaking the saving part. So, you decide. Actually, I also am involved in academia. I teach ASP.NET at Masaryk University in Brno. And coincidentally, I will have an Orchard Core lecture next month. So I hope that I will inspire young minds, young students, to join the Orchard Core course. Before we start, again, this presentation builds on top of what my colleague, Michael, already presented last year. We basically started developing portals on Orchard Core, and for that we needed 3 large modules. And since last year, we came a huge wave, or we did a lot of improvements. We polished the UI and UX, we added new capabilities, and we also have some real life fish examples on how we can use this import module per se to make my and our life easier. So, our company basically develops 3 types of applications. The first one is presentation website, then it's a portal, and actually we have one e-commerce solution built on Orchard Core, but it's rather simple, and we usually use different frameworks such as Kentico or SmartStore. So we mainly develop the presentation website and portal on Orchard Core. The presentation website is basically in our company the same as Mark already presented with the holistic case. We have content that is stored in the Orchard Core content module, and basically all the content is managed directly in the administration. As I think our biggest presentation website, I chose Easy Redmine, which had marketing talk yesterday basically. Standa from Easy Software explained to us how they use AI in their application basically. So when do we need to import data into the presentation website? Basically, as I said, all the content is managed directly in the administration. So the only use case where we can use it reasonably is when we have a customer who needs to migrate from another CMS. They usually have some older solution. We came across WordPress, as it is probably the most used CMS as I know of. But I can show you that it does not really matter. What matters is that there's a data source, and it does not really matter whether it's WordPress or any other CMS, as long as you can get the data from the CMS itself. The imports also are triggered manually. You don't need any periodical imports, as the content is imported usually before the site is launched into the production, is in the staging stage or pre-prod stage. So having this in mind, we actually handled 2 cases where our customer needed to migrate a lot of content from the WordPress solution. We usually use, in the past, we used to migrate via hand manually, which was fine when the sites were small. I mean, if there is tens of or maybe 100 of content items, it's much cheaper and time efficient to have people to migrate it manually. But some clients have really big solutions. So for these cases, when the content items are in thousands or 10,000, we usually use this import module. And another case or application type is portal. We have solutions where we integrate the application with customers' ERP system, which stores the data. As example, I have a company that's called Big Logistic, which is a company that wanted to build a portal solution for their customer to track the state of the package they ordered. This project basically meant that we had to connect to the ERP system, which was Helios, via API, replicate the data in our database, and then show it basically on the front end. Contrary to the presentation website, these imports are rather periodical because you need to update the state of the packages, let's say every hour, and it's not triggered manually, but rather automatically via some background task or any other action. Another client is actually a government organization for which we developed a calculator. Basically, Czech law mandates that the government has to have its own calculator for energy products, and the price of the products is calculated based on some equations which take a lot of variables and constants which have to be imported into the system. These constants change over time, usually once every year. So every year the new data set of constants come, and client is actually insistent on uploading them in Excel spreadsheet format. And they do this every year. We try to offer an API solution, but as the government is kind of slow in adopting new changes, they opted for the Excel spreadsheet solution. Okay, so we needed to import the data. We needed a menu that would do this, but we also had some requirements, as we already had some experience before importing data on Critical platform. And on the Critical platform, we usually have one import service, abstract one, and for each use case, we developed implementation that basically just defined the mapping from the import item into the entity. This was done very directly in code, which was a great solution at the time, as we needed to be fast, but also has its drawbacks. Like, for example, every time you want to change how the data are mapped, you need to change the code, deploy it, which takes time, and we really like the way Orchard handles settings. Basically everything, or almost everything, is editable in the administration itself. So that's what we wanted to achieve with the editable profile definitions and the mapping function. Also, we wanted to make this module extendable so that we can add support for new data sources as easily as possible. Let me show you what the structure of the modules look like. Basically, the most important one is Orchard data import, which is the core module that handles the import itself. And for each data source, we create a new module that only defines the data source service, which obtains the data, and also some settings that are related to data itself. This way, we can easily service our customer. Let's assume that Longdix want us to build a new solution, new portal. And also assume that they have MySQL, which stores some data they want to display. No? SQL Server?
More like that.
Yeah, okay, so let's pretend it's SQL Server. It doesn't really matter. What we would usually do is that we would deploy our cursor chart as nuggets, which we use in the customer solution. So Lomdic CMS is the startup project. It contains all these nugget packages as references. And in case Lomdic wants us to import the SQL Server, we would create the Lomdic data import SQL Server application or module that would actually define the connection to the server, perhaps will transform the data in some way and store it in our database. So the solution, as I already described, is one import service which takes iData source service, which is responsible for obtaining the data. The data are retrieved in this format. Basically, there is an import table and import row. Import row contains all the values that will be used in the import stage. And these objects are brought to the data transformation service, which basically has a profile definition which defines how the data should be mapped. And the data are transformed from the import rows to import, not fields, but items that have different fields. This is actually one of the examples that I will show. The employees table or the Excel spreadsheet contains more data than just the employees. It also contains their job title, which we decided to store in a database separate table. So into the job table, only one field comes, which is job title. And as you can see, there are also some existing data. We also try to be as efficient and as fast as possible. So before we want to insert or update the data in the database, we actually collect the data first, and in case there is no change in the data, we just skip it, so that there are no input updates or any SQL methods called redundantly. Okay, I know it was a lot, but let me show you an example on how to import pages from WordPress. I have created a very simple WordPress site. I have zero experience in WordPress. Just let me disclose this. So I have 2 blog posts. Each of them has title, some paragraphs, image, and some other HTML content. As I said, very simple. I also filled an excerpt and assigned a tag to this blog post. When I want to export the data, I can do it right here. I use the standard WordPress export function, and I can export posts with some status. What I get is actually an XML file which contains not only the items, the blocks themselves, but also information about the author. You can actually export all other content types, basically from WordPress. For the demo purposes, I chose to show it only on the blog post, but the mapping and everything is up to you. Okay, so we have the file, and as you can see, the images are outputted in the format that contains the domain. This can and doesn't have to be an issue. As I said, the most used use case is to have the site to be migrated from one CMS to another, which usually means that the domain stays the same. But as the domain can change, we also transform these full URLs into relative paths that show the content from the media library. Before I started the presentation, I also copied the media library from the WordPress into our Orchard core, there are only 2 images, but it's a necessary step to ensure that we have something to show. Okay, now we go interesting part. Let's go to import export, importers, add to import template. Let's just run one, for example, for fun. And something happened. What happened? We will see. But the first thing that was imported was me. I was author, so I was imported in the state or draft form. And also here are my 2 blog posts. As you can see, they were modified 1 day ago, which is kind of weird, as I imported them right now. So let's see what happened. Back to import template. Just a quick look. You input in the import template, you define whether you want to import the data in content form or as a relational data. In the case of content, we obviously want the content to be stored in the document table as a standard or chart or content. You can also choose data source service name. I use our own implementation of WordPress import service, but you are free to use whatever you want. If you have a better library than us, or have perhaps a very custom-made WordPress solution, you can use your own service to obtain the data and transform them in our format. The data source is file because I received a file from WordPress, but in case of the Helios API, I actually do not need file. I just need to define the API's URL and some credentials. Okay. So each import template basically means one use case. In this case, I want to import data from WordPress, and each import profile, which is here, is representing one content type that I want to import. The first one is author, and here in the content tab, you can see that I can choose whether to import it as published or as a draft. I also declare the content type in my target system, which is books author. Let me just show you how. Excuse me. The JSON of testing books author that I created before the presentation, it basically has only 2 fields, which is user email and username. There is localization part, of course, and also authoral part, as we would presumably display this author in the website on the front end. So this is how normal content item would look like if I would create it in orchard.org. And in the import, I declare a similar item recipe definition, which, as you can see, is quite close to what the resulting content item looks like. I'm missing some fields like content item ID, version ID, UTC, created, modified date. That's because what happens in the background is that I create a new content item of type books author, and I basically merge resolved item recipe definition. Therefore, I only have to declare what I need to actually declare, such as the field and also some other parts. As you can see, we decided to use Liquid for transforming the data. As it is defined in the administration, there is actually not a lot of ways how to do it. We could also declare some kind of system of transformation functions, which would be called via reflection in the background. But we kind of like Liquid, and the rest of the system uses it, so why not use it here? So basically, each item recipe definition is resolved with different contexts. Each import row, each import entry is basically iterated over, and it is passed in context to the template resolver in forms of import data. So let me just show you the code. quite a lot of solutions. But anyway, here's the import data service, and here's the author part. We use PressSharper to load the XML file and to transform it into C# objects, which we then transform into a dictionary of string and object. So these keys and values are available to us in the import. As you can see, I use all of these actually, and I pass it, as I said, in the context as import data. So I get the email, I get the username, and also I get the ID. What is this? Source unique property. What does it mean? Basically, we need to track what we are importing so that when the import runs again, we can actually match the imported items to what we are importing at the moment. So we are building content hooks import path to this content item, which contains the ID and its value, so that we can match these together and not create new items where we can just update the already existing one. Also, we support importing into custom collections, but as the content is stored in the default document table, there's no need to fill this. And in the WordPress tab, we just define that we want to import from the WordPress's authors collection. Okay, so now it makes a little more sense. We have the imported author, which has all the fields from the XML, and also it is in the stage form. As I have declared it, I want to be as a draft. Let's take a look at the blog post. Blog posts are a bit more complex. Therefore, in the mapping function, you can see that there's quite a lot of liquid already, or quite a lot of properties. What we do is that we also declare modified and created UTC. In both cases, when we implemented this import, it was required of us because customer wanted to show when the article or the blog post was published. So we had no other meaning of achieving this other than setting the modified UTC, created UTC, or some custom data type field to this value. But as our chart orders the content items via the modified UTC, we decided that it is reasonable to store it in the modified UTC field. We can also import taxonomies. We have two taxonomies on the blog post. Let me just show you. One of them is hooks category, which defines where the content item is stored. Basically, this tells you whether the URL contains the blog prefix or something else. But as the blog post, or all the import items are blog post, I didn't really bother with that. What I set was the blog post label, which would be basically a label that will show what kind of blog it is. And I use this kind of syntax, which looks horrible and should probably be hidden inside a liquid filter. But for the demo purposes, I have some tag terms I can iterate over and just say these, and it will basically produce this content item. Alright, the rest is pretty analogous to the hooks author. The only important part is body. Basically, what happens is that WordPress outputs all the content in one XML tag. So we just take it and store it in HTML type field. In the real world, we would probably take a close look at the body, try to parse it, and split it into widgets, which would result in more dynamic and real-life looking page, as everything right now is in the content field, which is not ideal. We would usually have defined widgets in the flow and we would store the image in, let me just show you in the books image, yeah, right here. But all of this can be achieved by Liquid, as Liquid is extremely powerful. It's just up to you. But basically, the JSON structure allows you to do whatever you want, which I think is cool. I like when software is basically meant to be exploited in a good way, that you can basically take it and achieve anything with it. And we also defined all domain, which is a field that basically takes the domain and finds every image and strips the domain that I declared from it. So when we actually take a look at the content and the image source, we can see that the path is already looking a bit better. It basically points to the media library that we have in our chapter. All right, that's probably everything from the WordPress import. Let's move to something more relational. Basically, I want to import employees, and I want to import them from this table, which is an Excel spreadsheet. As you can see, the data are not ideal. First of all, there is a corrupt employee, whatever that means. It just means that the data are in bad form. And also there is someone who is called skip this. Perhaps it is an employee who was fired and they do not want to import him. Also, the data are not in the normal forms, as there are two office locations. Really good data, but that's what you get from a customer. So we decided that we basically want to define the database scheme that suits us. So we want employee table, and also we decided in this case to demonstrate that you can basically take this spreadsheet and modify it in whatever data scheme you need and you want. So job is a separate table, which is probably not needed in this case, but let's pretend that there are some more related columns that could be normalized via this method. Also, there is a trick how to achieve the end-to-end relations via this import, but I think we will not have time to discuss them. So, just a disclaimer, this can be done. Okay, so let's import the employees. I'm using SQL Express, and just so that I'm transparent, nothing is there. Now let's go back to the import template, and let's import some employees. Okay, let's do this one, import. Wow, so something went wrong. But it was intentional this time. I have an empty sheet, which basically means that the library that we use to obtain the data through an exception because it couldn't find the sheet it's supposed to. So let's import some real data this time and just take a look at the status. So this one ran for 0 seconds because it processed them items, so it's probably reasonable to stay in the milliseconds. But also I can see that the previous import failed. I can see the reason why it failed and what it did nothing, so that's good. And in the correct one I can see that I inserted 5 jobs just to demonstrate that we can get different results. I import again, and 5 jobs were ignored, as well as employees. This is basically what I said on the slides. If the data are the same in the import files as in the database, nice. There are some job IDs. Let's take a look at the jobs. Nice. So let's check this. Yeah, I mean, we have 5 jobs because these 2 were not supposed to be imported, and we also have all the employees. Trust me on that one. And let's see how this was possible. So first of all, I declare data source service as an Excel file, import data service, and I want to import from file, obviously. The data, when you do not take the content, are stored as relational data. We actually have custom tables module, which allows you to declare these tables and to perform migrations on them. Let me just demonstrate this quickly. I will add a new column to the job table. So perhaps salary range. And let's declare decimal number. Doesn't really matter. It can be nullable so that my life is easier. Save, apply. And when I look at the database, and refresh. Then refresh again. And look at the columns. Yeah, the columns edit. So it's basically our little ORM, as I like to call it. It basically lets us to define the relational data tables or tables directly in the administration, and we actually do not need any other tools like a different work for this. Okay, back to import. I got carried away. So there are 2 profiles running again. The first is job. In the database section, you can see first that there is an identity support. What was not apparent from the ERD, is that the job ID is an identity column, which means basically that we do not need to insert the ID, but rather it is returned to us when the data are inserted. And since we need the job ID as a foreign key in the employee table, we can basically declare that the job table has a primary column that is called ID. We also define the alias as there are probably more IDs or more tables with the primary column called ID. And we also define what data should be skipped. In this case, it's easy. We do not want to import any job titles that have empty value. We can also define if the data should be inserted, updated, or deleted. In this case, again, I'm fine with everything, but you can imagine a scenario where you only want to insert new data, or do not want to insert data at all, only want to update existing one. Okay, mapping. First, I need to declare or define in which table I want to import data. It's called job. I also define source and target properties. In this case, I actually decided to change the job title from the source data into the name in our table. So I map from job title to name. I can also define the field type, whether the field is nullable or not, and the value. In this case, I do not want to transform the value, so I keep it empty. But we'll see that, first of all, it supports liquid, so any data transformation is possible in the more advanced scenarios. Okay, row split key is a magic field that will help us to split the rows for our needs. Probably there will not be enough time to cover it, but if you are interested in how this works, feel free to ask me or contact me later. Anyway, this is the only field that I declare, so it's rather simple. In the Excel tab, I can just declare or define the sheet name from which I want to take the data. I also define the start and the end cell. You do not actually need to do this, but if you do this, or the library, if you leave it empty, will recognize where the data starts and where they end. But if you declare it, then basically you can have more tables on the same sheet and choose which to use. Okay, so let's take a look at employee. Again, we want to scale employees that have no ID. Makes sense. Also, this one is the banished one that we decided that was not supposed to be included in the import data. We have different operators. So this relates bugs with touchpad. You can basically choose what equality method should be used to compare these values. Anyway, again, we need to define the table name, source, and target unique properties. In this case, we want to map employee ID in the ID column, which is done like this. Again, nothing that is interesting. The only thing is that the ID now is not identical, but rather just a primary key. So we kind of hope, in this case, that employee ID will be unique. Otherwise, the import will fail. We usually handle these scenarios like these to basically transform the schema to have a primary ID column, which is identical, and store the employee ID as an external ID or something similar. Okay, now comes the mapping from the first name to name. Those who actually see the data could see that there are two columns related to name, first name and last name in the source data, but we only have one name column in our table. Usually it's the other way around, but again, let's pretend that this is okay. And now we see what we can actually do with the liquid. You can, first of all, access the data as in the WordPress import via the import data dictionary, basically. And you can also call any liquid filter you need or not. In this case, I'm just appending an empty space and then last name, but this can really be anything. You can transform everything to lowercase, uppercase, or anything you. Another interesting field is job ID. As you can see, there is no job ID in the source. That was the point. I only had the job title, but in the previous run, we actually took the ID that was provided by the database via the identity settings, and we can use it in the next import as it is basically added to the data. So in this case, we have the job ID available, and the primary column alias and the target is the same, so we keep it like this. And that's basically it. I forgot to track the time, so how much time do we have left?
We are 3 minutes.
3 minutes only?
Until the questions.
All right, so let me here. Thank you for your attention. I hope that I made it clear. If not, then just bombard me with the questions.
So, questions?
Sebastian doesn't have a real question, he just wants to troll. This is probably not interesting with small export files that you download with, but I've seen there's some kind of job functionality, which I presume is for the larger imports, right? Okay, in that case, what happens if one of the steps fail? Like you have 10,000 blog posts, the 1,500 fails. Can you resume from there, or is the whole thing rolled back, or what happens?
Thank you. Good question. We do not basically what happens. So if I would not be afraid in the case of content, as you store basically everything as a document. So if you pass a string there, it will probably be all right. But we basically trust that everything is all right. It is a bit more delicate in the case of importing data via the API, for example. But we usually do not, I would say, these issues do not happen. And if they do, it usually fails at the beginning. We also have a quite extensive logging, so we know what actually crashed and why. But there are no transactions, so basically what happened, and the system crashes in the middle, then only half of the data are imported.
Okay, and if I remember correctly, you also said that you do this like once for a project, so probably this doesn't happen on the live site anyway, right?
It depends. For the content import, it usually happens before the launch of the site is basically happens. So it's still in the stage or pre-prod domain area. But for example, for the packages, for the logistic company, the imports are running via background tasks every day.
Okay, I see. All right, thank you.
So,
Can you tell us about the shapes?
I can. They are not working.
Trolling.
Basically, each module. just a quick intro for Sebastian. First of all, the shapes are not working. Like, I know it's probably a skill issue, but I had a lot of troubles with importing this or implementing this. Basically, we have content handlers, custom services, and each of them, well, it looks basically like content display drivers. You choose when to show and what to show. So let me just, I don't want to show you. It's really ugly. I had to do some hacks to make Sebastian's code work. So let's just assume that we have shapes and we assign them dynamically to the view. Is it alright? Or do you want to know more? It's okay. Sebastian,
Is that a question for me?
no question.
What? Oh yeah, you want a question?
Yeah, come on.
Can you go to the code where you were doing the liquid import, like with the dictionary, import data? I want to see the line where you render the liquid. It will be called render async.
Let me consult my team leader. Can I show that? Is it not under NDA? All right.
We can blur it out.
It's render async, I know the code.
We will need to publish some code for that.
Just one disclaimer. The imports work, but when I was supposed to present them, I did a lot of refactoring and optimizations and documentation. So if something is looking not ideal, it's mainly because of this. Okay, so here it comes. This is the content one, but
Too fast.
not this one. I have more render async, so let me choose the best one. What the fuck? Not this one.
The one that renders the content item object that you do import data by whatever append.
Okay, this is the one that renders the content item.
Okay, so it's wrong. You see the you see the second argument?
Yeah.
What is that? Why did you put null encoder as default? Do you know what it is? That's the encoder. By default, it's null, but when you render HTML, you put an HTML encoder, right? The same way when you do Razor, you do add something, it will encode the thing into HTML, so you can't inject any other HTML. And here you are rendering a JSON document. So now if your source data contains JSON or strings or double quotes or whatever, then they are rewriting the JSON that you are writing. So you need a JSON encoder.
All right. Let me just fix
Yes.
this.
And then fix everywhere else that we are doing that.
There's no.
Just saying. Shapes don't work, maybe you don't know how to make it.
This is actually not the shapes part.
I know, but like that's the it's the JSON encoder default or something like that. We have to import the namespace. That's it. Thank you.
Are you sure?
I knew that it was unwise to
I just asked for
alienate.
one line of code and there was
The most important
one
guy
thing
in
that
the
was,
list.
right?
Basically when I'm already here, what I will show you that basically each import, this is the relational import. So for each value, you evaluate this liquid. And basically we even support JavaScript, but that's another story. And in case it is a liquid macro, we actually render the string async, and then we just take the string and convert it to the resulting data type. So this one is fine.
I know, yeah, but I'm trying to think about, yeah, probably, yeah. It depends on what you generate. You generate HTML or just text to no specific format, just text.
No, just like
Then it's fine.
excellent. Right, so back to the presentation. How about that? Any other questions?
When you're initially parsing the files, so for example, parsing the Excel files or whatever is coming from the API, do you have a generic / dynamic way to do it, or you have to, for every customer, every format, write a parser that gets the data to your system?
Also, that depends. In the WordPress service, most of the customization comes in forms of metadata. And we actually, let me just show you. So that, not this one, but this one. We actually, in case of the blog post, include the metadata in the import data dictionary. So you should be fine in every situation, basically. We don't guarantee this, obviously, as we have a little of implementations of this, but the data from the metadata is here. In case of the spreadsheet, it's really straightforward. We have a library which is called MiniExcel, which is responsible for obtaining the data, and it supports only the XLSX, the newer format. It doesn't actually support the old one, but the data are dynamically transformed into the basically dictionaries.
Thank you.
Other question? And thank you for your presentation.